Welcome back to Curious Now from the Center for Medical Simulation. I'm Jenny Rudolph. We're back with BJ So and Mel Barlow to talk about our workout of the week regarding what is your listening style and what are you listening for? Welcome, BJ.
Hey, Jenny. Hey, so I'm BJ. I'm an anesthetist based in Wollongong in Sydney, and I'm also the sim lead for my anesthetic department in Wollongong.
Great. Welcome back, BJ. And Mel.
Hey, Jenny, I'm Mel Barlow. I'm the academic lead for the specialised learning environments and SIM at Australian Catholic Uni, and I'm a nurse.
Great to have you back, Mel. So this week's workout of the week related to listening. And in the podcast, we talked about the difference between listening to respond when you're kind of looking for an opening to get your idea in as soon as possible in the conversation versus listening to understand, where you're a little bit more sitting back and taking your time to either understand or connect with the other person. And the workouts of the week were to do one or more of three things. So one was just noticing yourself listening. When are you listening to respond? When are you listening to understand? The second part of it was, how does your body feel? How do you feel when you're in those two different modes? And we might talk about that if that was something you noticed. And then the last piece was, if you happen to notice yourself toggling between those two different modes of listening to understand versus listening to respond, what was that like for you? And Mel, I'd love to come to you first. What did you find out this week in the workout of the week?
I did. I just first really want to thank you for doing this topic. I think this is so important, and teaching people to listen to understand. I think we don't do that in healthcare communication. And we wonder why there's, so many medical errors related to miscommunication, right? So awesome topic. Thank you. For me, I notice I tend to listen to respond with my children. And there is this I really did notice this physical response that, like, I tighten and
Mm.
in my chest and my arms, and it's almost like this anticipation of, I want to come back, with the response, and I've got an opinion on that. And I really felt it. Yet when I'm in work mode, I actually had feedback the other day from my manager saying, gosh, you're so good at listening and making people feel heard.
Wow, fascinating.
Yet I don't see that happening at home at all. And so I'm kind of like, well, my kids are middle to late teenagers now, and I really need to do better and start role modeling. And, they're forming opinions of the world, and so I really noticed a switch between home and work. And so that's something I really want to work on.
Yeah, Mel, I just feel drawn to normalize that you and all the other moms, including me, possibly fall into that same trap. But I'm also very interested in the difference that goes on with us when we are kind of more on the front foot when we're listening. I'm finding myself very curious about what is propelling it's almost like you're in your tennis ready stance when you're talking to them versus with your colleagues, somehow you've got your tennis racket hanging down at your side and you're loose and you're relaxed. And wonder if you have any thoughts on that contrast.
I think it's mindset. I'm very conscious at work. Like, this is kind of also related to my research and body of work. So I'm really conscious of, one, in my role as academically role modeling certain behavior. And two, if it's, in my area of research and I'm putting things out there that, this is what you should do, I need to walk that talk. So I'm super conscious of that. Whereas at home, I guess I'm much more relaxed and less on guard. And I know my kids really well. So I think now that, they're becoming very much their own people and their own minds that I need to do better there.
So interesting. BJ, as you're listening, any thoughts popping to your mind about this?
Oh, absolutely. I can totally identify with what you're saying, Mel. I think I'm very much a listen to respond at home, and I'm a listen to understand a lot more consistently at work. I think my wife often finds it mind-boggling that I talk so much about communication and listening styles at work because between her and I'm not that great. I think if we brought her onto the show, she'd be saying something like, "I don't know how you do this at work, BJ. Like, why are they hiring you to teach this stuff?" And I've been thinking, like your example, why is it that I seem so different? And I think it's because at home, I just let my guard down. I'm on default mode, BJ, and I'm not thinking as you are. How am I modeling? I'm not being as intentional. I'm just being the default state where I naturally sit. And I don't know what's the answer to that. I think being aware that my default state may not always be the best state for that moment, and often we talk about not wanting to take too much of work home. Maybe this is an exception to that, where
Mm.
some of what I learn at work, I can use at home to good impact, to good effect.
So as I listen to you both, one of the things that comes to mind for me is something happened to me at some point where I had this experience that listening to understand was like a little vacation. And I mentioned that in the podcast, that instead of having to work so hard and think about what the other person was saying, I could go into a more soft focus with my eyes, and that I would still be listening and I would still potentially have useful ways to connect or insights. And both my kids are out of the house now, so when I do get to talk to them, it's not that common. So I think potentially it's a lot easier for me to flip into listen to understand mode because I don't see them and I'm, genuinely curious and interested, and I'm not having to make sure they get to soccer on time or whatever. But I am wondering, I'm assuming that there are moments when I'm default Jenny, which is sort of like busy and talking and, just like I love that phrase, BJ. I'm going to import that into my lexicon. And each of you is, default Mel or default BJ, but you need a vacation at home from time to time. And I'm wondering if we think about kind of positive deviance, like those bright spots or those moments when you do listen to understand at home, are there any patterns to that?
I think you're right when you say it's a little vacation. Like when I do with my oldest son and actually sit down and listen to understand, it's a really enjoyable conversation. Yeah, I really enjoy those moments. And, it's stupid that I haven't connected the dots till now because I think you get caught up in the busyness of every day. But I think, yeah, they're much more enjoyable, enriching, meaningful interactions.
Mel, I agree so much. This is James again. Mel, I agree so much. I was thinking the same thing, that it's amazing how, and I think it's probably your default state has to do with how you were raised and how you were taught and all of those things. And it is so amazing in my home to, with my wife, just have a conversation where I go, "Hey, James," internally, "you don't need to guess the end of the sentence before the person gets there. Just sit down and take a deep breath and listen to it through. And then when it's done, you don't have to respond right away. Let it like sit there and, put your hands around it for 10 seconds and think about what was just said. And it's just so pleasant to do that. I wish I did it more often or more by default, but when I am able to direct myself that way to say, hey, just sit with that for a minute. Just really think about what was just said, and then you can respond to it. It really is so pleasant and relaxing, and you find out things that will surprise you from people you didn't think could still surprise you.
Thanks, James.
So on that note, just Mel, going back for a second, when you do sit down with your son and listen, what propels that versus the on guard mode?
There's a point in time where he's home from work and out of his room. And I know I have this window in order to have an interaction and a conversation. And so rather than, we've had some turbulence in teenage years. So I'm at the point where I don't want that turbulence. I want to actually have a conversation and build that relationship. And so I know I have this window, so I want to use that window to have a positive interaction.
BJ, any thoughts, final thoughts before we wrap up this conversation?
No, I think so. Yes, I do have thoughts. I'm doing that Australian thing. Nah, yeah. Um, Essentially, for me, I think one of the things that helps to reorient my mindset is appreciating that the other party, in this case, I'm gonna use my wife again as an example, really appreciates and actually wants me to understand. I don't want you to fix my problems, BJ. I want you to listen and understand is a refrain I often have to be reminded of because I'm not good at that. And so knowing that that's the goal, that's going to be more meaningful for the person I'm speaking with, that can help to pull me back from analytical mode and engage in a listening style that's being asked of me in that moment. So that's for me, my propeller into correct action.
Hmm. Well, we've been talking about different listening styles and the main two contrast, which is listening to respond and listening to understand. And BJ and Mel, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. Great to have you with us again, BJ.
Thank you very much.
And Mel, thank you.
Thank you so much.